Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 303 for Monday, June 24th, 2024. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including YouTube, where you'll also find the video version. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening or watching to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, is a very musical Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
I'm trying anyway. And if you would like to hear a little bit more about my guitar adventures, I've only been at this for 2 weeks. You can listen to the render distance. That is at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. You'll get access to the extended version of the show every week. This week, we talked about my new Lego set, a little bit of some studio changes that are happening around, as well as my adventures with the new guitar. And we do that for our patrons. So as a member of the community, you get access to that. You can also get access to things like the monthly Minecraft Hangout that's coming up on June 29th. That's going to be at 10 o'clock Atlantic, UTC minus 4 hours, 2 p.m. in the UK for folks overseas. That's where we talk with our patrons about what they've been building in Minecraft. New update, so we're hoping to see some stuff built in 1.21 this time around. The quarterly hangout is coming up in July after Johnny returns from a little bit of a vacation. And the Chunk Mail Dispenser is an all-email listener episode. And that is normally this week, but we're pushing that to next week. So stay tuned for more email coming up next week on July 1st.
Yes, since my trip to the States is going to be basically the following day after the next podcast, we thought it was going to be easier to just go through a little bit of listener mailbag stuff on the day, make it slightly less pressure, slightly less prep as far as all of the discussion stuff goes. But the first thing we'd like to discuss, as always, is what we've been doing in our Minecraft lives. So Joel, how's the Citadel? Are you updated to 1.21 yet, or are you still working on bits and pieces?
I'm still working on bits and pieces of the pumpkin farm, and I don't need any of the new blocks, so I'm just going to stick with 1.20.4. Yes, that's what we're on, until I can have a chance to update. However, I am hoping that this is going to happen this week. The blocks that are coming in for me in 1.21 are of great interest to future things down the road on West Hill. So now that it's been almost 2 weeks, coming up this Thursday will be 2 weeks for 1.21 coming out, that usually means a lot of the mods and the data packs will be updated. I think it's the data packs that are going to hold me back. A lot of the main performance mods that we use on the Citadel have been updated, so we don't have to wait for those. So I'll be going through a checklist this week and getting through at least the bare minimum. Sometimes we'll update when there's like a few other things that are lagging behind, but they're like not essential. You know, the shulker box, mod that I use. I don't need it to play. It's just a nice little perk that we have, like inventory UI changes, things like that don't really affect gameplay. So that's what we're looking at this week. This past week, I have moved on with the pumpkin farm. Took some time to gather some resources, and came back and added a pumpkin cart detail to the front of the pumpkin farm, so that's next to the house. I added some mini blocks and some armor stands. With one of the great things about armor stands with the armor statues is that you can get a pumpkin that's about 3/4 the size of a block, and then we've got the mini blocks, and they're the really tiny ones. So I could have a variety of shapes on the pumpkin cart, which was really, really cool. And so that ended up looking right. I wanted to make sure that the cart didn't block the view of the house. So one of the things I did was I roughed out the cart, and I roughed out a custom tree next to it, and then left it for the next day. Came back to it the following stream, and I did end up adjusting it, like I think northwest by like a block. And it was just enough that I wasn't covering up some key features of the farmhouse as you approach. So that was important to me, just kind of controlling those views, kind of like the way that a video game developer would design like a level in Zelda. Like when you come around a corner, you want to see certain specific silhouettes and things. And so that's what I was doing. And then I had other spaces around the farm to fill in that I've been doing the same thing with. I created the space and then had no idea what to put in it, and just kind of left it for a while. I've been walking by it every other day going like, what am I going to put here? And then Sonic21, one of the chatters in my Twitch chat, suggested that I do like a custom compost pile. And I thought, that's actually not a bad idea. Let's see what we can do here, because I've been working with muddy mangrove roots and mud and some coarse dirt in the pumpkin patches. And so I made a custom compost pile, and then I used spruce trapdoors, I know you're surprised, to create a couple of like custom compost bins, and have like mangrove roots, mighty mangrove roots, and mud in those. So it looks like kind of like the start of where the compost would like slowly get compacted. And then the pile is where you'd probably come to shovel it and then use it in your garden. And you're going to like this, since I know you're a copper fan. I used a mini block of raw copper to have a rotting pumpkin sitting in the compost pile.
Oh, excellent. So yeah, kind of like the oxidized like green color is like a bit of mold growing on it or something.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Quite clever. I like that.
Yeah, it worked out really well, and immediately it kind of worked too well because I looked at it like, whoa, that's that was gross. Like,
yeah,
I work as a young man. I worked in a produce section at a grocery store, and the smell out back near the dumpster where you put all of the stuff that had gone bad. Mm-hmm. I can remember it to this day. It gets into your clothes. Visceral. And so a rotting pumpkin, I know what that smells like. And I was like, nope, it's definitely the right block for it, for sure.
Sure, yeah.
And then I moved on, speaking of pumpkins, and I did a lot of the pumpkin patch details as the pumpkin patch swings north around the farm. I'm kind of working in that area. I really don't have that much left. It's only just the northernmost patch. As well as the wall. The wall is still basically cobblestone and it needs to be detailed like I did the other week. I've just been putting that off because I find that I want to do the pumpkin details first and then move on to the wall details, because I find that the wall kind of like responds to what's happening with the pumpkin details. And I did put in a few other things, like using the armor stand to put an axe on a chopping block and have some pumpkin seeds on the ground. It's really subtle. It's not anything that many people are going to notice other than me, but I like that it's there. And it is cool in that when you first walk into the pumpkin farm and you're walking down the main path, you look down one of the paths to your right. This chopping block and axe is actually right at the end of that path. So it almost is like an invitation to say like, oh, that's different. Like that's pumpkins everywhere, except for that brown thing with an axe sticking out of it. So it kind of pushes you to look down that way and maybe walk down that way and see everything from a different angle. But everything's come together pretty well. I really like the way that the trails worked out for the cart. Like it looks like the cart's been parked there a number of times and it's worn down the grass. But that's what I've been up to. Just a lot of detail work. It's slow going. I feel the inventory pinch because my inventory is full almost all the time.
Yeah. I was taking a look at the screenshots that you shared last week so that I could put some in the video version on YouTube. And a thought occurred to me that I thought, oh no, if I have to suggest this to Joel at some point, but I know it's just going to make a ton of extra work for him. And in the screenshots this week, you've already done it, and it's putting sea pickles on top of the pumpkins because they look like the green stem of a pumpkin, where normally the flat texture has like that kind of folded over looking stem on it, but it's not like a fresh stem. Like it's kind of, with the rest of the orange texture of the pumpkin, it looks kind of dried out. And I thought, I've seen people do that and it looks great and it looks organic and is a really fun use of sea pickles as a detail block, but I don't want to create more work for Joel. He's already telling me this pumpkin patch is taking him way longer than expected. But no, I think it's looking really cool. The extra details really sell it, and yeah, I can see everything kind of coming together in a really neat way that feels, again, like a tended pumpkin patch. It's like somebody's actually farming this instead of it being something that feels incredibly Minecraft and like methodical. Like that's the thing. There's clearly method to it, but it's a much more organic, these pumpkins are just growing wherever the plants will let them kind of thing, as opposed to it's all in neat rows and everything is as per the Minecraft like code, where if you line everything up in a row it grows better, or you have to alternate crops with other stuff. I think that's really great.
Thanks, man. You could probably twist this to be an actual functioning Minecraft farm. Like if you didn't have any custom pumpkins that were placed, if you just used the ones that are growing and you added these details around it, the only thing that you would want to avoid would be putting the vines on the pumpkins, because of course when you harvest the pumpkins, if that's your goal, you'd end up breaking the vines. But other than that, you could do something like this and just go through and carefully, because you'd obviously don't want to hit your ferns and your leaf blocks and things like that, but you could probably do a great deal of farming this way and still have it look pretty cool. I really appreciate the compliment though, because it's taking a long time, but I'm really liking the vibe now, not just in the pumpkin farm, but like out front of West Hill. Now that there's two big farms right as you walk outside the front gate, I find it really feels like a valley. Like it starts to feel like an inhabited world, which is nice.
Yeah.
And the sea pickles, to your point, actually help a lot with the two high ferns. The two high ferns looked really stalk-like. They shot up quite high vertically. So the trick that I did with the pickles was that I started putting them close to the ferns, and so it's almost like a step down. It's like using a slab to kind of like lower a wall. It goes like fern is really high, the sea pickle is a little bit lower, and then the bear pumpkin is like the lowest, and kind of gives you like a gradient in that way.
Yeah, there's
and
less like height contrast going on between
yeah,
the two blocks.
Exactly,
yeah, totally.
Exactly.
It kind of smooths things out a bit.
I got excited and I overdid it with the pickles at first, and the next stream I went back and I removed about half of them. They're very useful, but they're useful sparingly, and it never fails to surprise you the sound that they make when you put them on the pumpkin. Because most of the time they anticipate, most of the time they anticipate that you're going to be putting these underwater, so they have like a wet, soggy squish to them. And so when you put them on a pumpkin, they have this very audible squish, which is very different from the dirt noises and the pumpkin noises that you've been hearing all stream from me. So, but it was good. It was a good week, I think. I hope to wrap it up this week. I should not be still working on this as of next week. I hope to be doing other things. I'd like to take a break and get up to 1.21 and then do some just small one-off things, so I have some more stuff to talk about on the show next week. That's the goal.
Yeah, well, I'll try my best not to suggest any more details if they occur to me this week, but I'll have some other stuff to do myself, because I'm currently backlogging a couple of videos for my time away. So I've just recorded a world tour for episode 100 of season 3 of the Minecraft Survival Guide. Traditionally, I do a 101 questions video after that, where I answer community questions about the game, and a bunch of people are leaving like one-sentence questions on my community feed now, in the same way that they did for emailing the show for episode 300 of this show. So I'll probably be doing a bit more poking around in trial chambers after that, because my most recent activity, having raided my first trial chamber, gotten a bunch of ominous keys, I farmed a few of those up on stream, just repeating the trial experience over and over without setting up any like farms or anything around the spawners, just going in and attacking the skeletons with my smite axe, so it was nice and easy to take them out. I got maybe like, I want to say 16 or so ominous keys, took those to a brand new trial chamber that I located by trading with a different cartographer. It turned out to be right on the border of terrain I had explored before, so when I got there, half the structure was like already generated chunks of terrain, so it cut off in weird places, and there were like sections of the wall that were just blocks of deep slate instead of the room continuing the way I expected it to. But there were a few ominous vaults in there. I got a heavy core from one of them almost immediately, which was amazing, because that was where I wanted to cut things off. I can craft the mace, and then I left that in my ender chest and then tore down most of the structure for building blocks. Because I wanted to do something that we're going to be talking about in the main discussion this week, which is sort of talk about how 1.21 is still an update that can appeal to a variety of gameplay styles, and even though the trial chambers and the mace are very combat-focused objectives and rewards, there's still a lot in here for a variety of playstyles, whether it's explorers, builders. Redstone folks obviously have the crafter, but there's a bunch of technical stuff that you can do with trial chambers as well, so it's not just a combat challenge. So that was kind of the theme of the video. I went through and tore down what is effectively a half-generated trial chamber. I got that maybe 3/4 of the way torn down, and what I'm left with is a big open empty space, which is A, spawn-proof, and B, has a lot of trial spawners in it that are blocked off strategically with stone blocks to make sure they don't get line of sight to the player and start spawning stuff. And that worked incredibly well, I'm happy to report. So if you want to get hold of a bunch of those blocks, you're probably going to be best going through the trial chamber, quickly blocking some stuff off so it doesn't spawn anything, and then the whole thing is yours to do what you want with. So after that, I was able to come back and do a video about the mace. That's going to be coming out this week. I got enchanted with Density 4, which is the one that deals more damage the further you fall, rather than the one that affects, like, armor, because I thought in a PvE situation that's going to be much more effective to use. In terms of, like, the PvP side of things, you might want to go with Breach, but Density is much better, like, all-round. So I've smashed a few things and tried out wind charges and that kind of combo. Unfortunately, the Wandering Trader happened to spawn while I was recording the video, so you can put 2 and 2 together and guess what happened at that stage. But yeah, no, I had a great time with the mace. That's, again, tucked away in the ender chest with Unbreaking and Mending on it, because I still only had the one heavy core, so I'll be looking for more of them before I consider it anything but a precious item that I must protect at all costs. Overall, though, I'm still having a lot of fun with this update. It's got a lot of stuff that appeals to me. New projects keep suggesting themselves, and I still need to fall back and do some of the stuff that's been part of the game for a while, like farms and other ways to acquire resources that I haven't quite covered in the guide yet. So lots to do, plenty of ways to stretch my legs at this point.
It's nice that the enchantments on the mace cover the gambit of like mostly a PvE situation versus PvP.
Yeah.
Whether you want to use it for traversal, and then you've got the wind charges to combine with that. And I think it's a smart way to have those enchantments available because of the different playstyles. And like it does feel very much like a combat focused update, but I feel like the mace, I'm curious to know what that would be like for building. Like you're talking about like a builder's guide for later. I feel like traversal with the mace could be really interesting, because I had to grow a mangrove tree. I was running low on vines, and I decided to grow a mangrove tree instead of a jungle tree just for fun. It took an eon to chop down, like an absolute. I was up and down scaffolding constantly. It'd be really interesting to see what you could do with a mace to just bound up on top of it, bound up to the different levels that you want to do. Because the mangroves, like, they tend to have a couple different layers. Like there's the root layer, and then there's the first branch layer, and then there's the second branch layer. And if depending on how high you get, like you could jump up and down, which would be kind of fun.
Yeah. I haven't yet got my hands on the wind bursts enchantment for the mace, so I'm still using wind charges, but I'm not using like the combo smash attack kind of thing.
Right.
And that I don't know if I can guarantee when I'll get to it, because it's a reward from Ominous Vaults, and so I have to keep grinding through trial chambers to get a chance of acquiring it. And even then, from what I gather from the information that's on the Minecraft wiki, you only get one level of Windburst per book. You never get something that's Windburst 2 or 3, so you have to combine them in order to get the higher levels, which means you're going to be building up to it regardless. And I think people are going to start by putting Windburst 1 on their mace as soon as they can, and then they're going to add another Windburst 1 book to it later to get the second tier of it, and then decide for themselves whether it's going to be worth upgrading to tier 3 or if tier 2 is enough. But a 21 block jump, as long as you have to hit a mob to get it started, that's still going to be a pretty hefty jump. Like that's going to be like to the roof of one of my houses in Survival Guide very comfortably. So I'm kind of curious to see how that works out for players once they start using it.
Oh yeah, that would clear the wall of West Hill for sure. Yeah.
That's how the invaders are going to get in. That's how all castle assaults will go. Is that you wait for a creeper to spawn on the outside, you smash attack, and you leap over the wall.
Just like in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, when they put Will Scarlet in the catapult and they shot him over the wall.
Yes, exactly that. This is the new. We're seeing the dawn of siege weaponry in Minecraft. This is the equivalent of the trebuchet now. But
oh man, I'd be down for that.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing how that shakes out in the next little while. Obviously, I'll have a couple of weeks away from the game, so my smash attacks will probably be pretty rusty. But for the moment, we want to move on into the news for this week, and there is not a whole lot, actually. There have been a couple of Bedrock Edition hotfixes, but the release of the Tricky Trials update has not prompted any immediate bug fix releases for Java Edition. Java Edition snapshots might resume at some stage soon, but we don't have any official news about that, and it's likely that there's going to be a 1.21.1 release in future, but no snapshots ended up getting published by the Java team this week. So instead, we wanted to cover the fact that Minecraft for PlayStation 5 is now in preview. We'll have a link to the Minecraft.net article about this. It was also published in a recent Bedrock changelog. The main article was published on June 20th, and to quote the article, "Today, we're launching the first preview of a native version of Minecraft for the Sony PlayStation 5. If you have the PS4 version of Minecraft installed on your PS5, you'll be able to access and test this early version by opening the game, navigating to Settings, and then Preview." The article goes on to explain that obtaining the PS4 version is currently the only way to play Minecraft on the PlayStation 5, so by developing a native version for this console, it can help the game run more effectively on the PS5's hardware. Once again, a couple of quotes from the article. "As this is a preview version of the game, multiplayer is only possible between other players on Sony PlayStation consoles. The exception to this is playing the preview on Realms, which allows you to cross-play with players on other devices, but if you have an active Realms subscription, you'll be able to create a preview realm separate from your regular realm. This is to stop any issues from affecting your regular realms, because preview versions of Minecraft could be unstable, there could be bugs that might affect your realm long-term. So once again, that's Minecraft for PlayStation 5. If you're interested in that, there's a link in our show notes over at thespawnchunks.com. That'll take you to minecraft.net, where the rest of the information can be found.
I confess I don't keep up with much outside of the Java edition, because that's my main gameplay, and I actually get my Bedrock news from doing this show. And from the Bedrock players in our community as well, obviously. And I did try, I tried Bedrock a little bit, I think a little bit on PC, just to talk about it one time on this show, and I did kick back and just kind of start a new world for fun on the Xbox. But because I learned to play with a mouse and keyboard, I find the controller so slow, and so it wasn't quite as rewarding as I was hoping it was going to be. I do think that the update for the PS5 just goes to show how ubiquitous Minecraft is as a game around the world. The fact that this is a modern gaming system that is getting a version of Minecraft specifically for it, so it runs better, means that the demand there has requested that. And there's enough people playing Minecraft, which is a 15-year-old game, on a what is essentially a current gen PlayStation that's capable of doing a lot as far as the graphics and stuff go for any other games. I think about Horizon Zero Dawn or the Forbidden West is the new one, and how beautiful those games look. And to have Minecraft be something that gets its own version as the PlayStations go on, I think it's cool. I know that, and feel free to correct me, anybody in our chat or anybody in our YouTube comments, that PlayStation does seem to be a little bit siloed as far as multiplayer goes. I'm not sure if it's that with other games as well, but at least with Minecraft, you have the Realms option to play with people on different platforms. That's, if you don't want to play on a realm, I guess you're kind of stuck. You kind of have to do your own thing that way. But I'm also coming from the Java world of being spoiled, where you have a server wherever you want, and then other Java players can come and join you, because it's all computer and the internet and servers, and it's not quite as restricted as something. So I don't know if the Xbox is the same way, because I've never done multiplayer Minecraft on Xbox. I've only ever done multiplayer on Java. So do you know, is Xbox as siloed as PlayStation in terms of who you can play with in Minecraft?
I don't think it is, but that's mainly because now with Microsoft owning Minecraft and them having Minecraft accounts tied to Microsoft accounts now, you have to log in with those login credentials on most other devices. So you can get to it from mobile and from PC Bedrock, because, PC Bedrock is more than likely running on Windows anyway. But you've also just got account logins that you can perform on any devices. And I expect it will be easier for PS5 players to crossplay once the PS5 version is actually fully launched, but there might just be some teething issues with account stuff that need to be resolved there. And I think it's good to see the Minecraft team still developing for natively supported console versions, as someone whose Minecraft journey began on console edition personally. And it's good to see that there's demand for it, because for a while when it was originally launched, the PS5 was like a mythical creature. I think I knew a couple of people who had seen one, but they sold out so quickly, I think because of demand and because of shortages in components during the pandemic and everything. I was reading the other day that the PS5 has now sold over 59 million units worldwide, which I think is outselling the PlayStation 4 now, at least for the span of time that it's been available. So yeah, I think it's good that there's going to be a PS5 version, and hopefully the crossplay thing gets sorted out once the version is fully ready to release. I don't know if there's going to be any additional support for stuff like ray tracing. I imagine not, because they can't always guarantee better performance for that on consoles the way they can with PC versions of stuff. Everyone has different specifications, so you can kind of expect that somebody with a better graphics card is going to perform better for them than it is for somebody with a lower-end graphics card. But I think at least it means that Minecraft stays current and feels like it's part of the console offering for whatever system you're running at that given time.
Can you do RTX on the Xbox? I don't think you can.
No, no, it
No.
was it was
Yeah.
something that I think they were hoping to provide because of the hardware of like more recent Xbox systems, but again, I think it's a performance thing. I think it's really just being able to guarantee like the standard being, 60 FPS up to 4K. Like they can't really roll that back and say, well, actually, if you have ray tracing enabled, you probably want to downscale this and downscale that and maybe drop your render
Yeah.
distance as well. And there's so many little concessions they have to make to quality at the point where they just don't think it's a viable product to share with the Xbox audience if it's just going to disappoint players. So I think that's probably the reason they haven't pushed it a little more.
And as someone that has an Xbox Series X, there is only a handful of games that I've played that are 4K, 60 FPS, and don't seem to have much of a hitch. The first one that comes to mind is Forza Horizon 5. That is a very pretty game, and there's a lot of lighting changes when you go through different tunnels and trees and dappled sunlight and stuff. And I've got it set for quality, not performance, and I've never noticed much of a hiccup in that game at all. On the flip side, I've noticed other games that I've tried. I tried Lords of the Fallen on the weekend, and it's pretty as long as you're not moving too fast. Because I definitely noticed like it, like even if your frame rate doesn't judder, like the animations or the camera or like something else within the game tends to like not keep up with
Yeah.
the level of quality and stuff. And also sometimes with that high dynamic range, you also get a lot of really darks, and like you're constantly like going to the settings screen and switching the brightness level and stuff like that. Very few games have got it right from the get-go. And unfortunately, I've not played a lot of brand new games. I think a lot of the games that I've played on Xbox that might take advantage of this were also released for Xbox One. So like something like Red Dead Redemption, like it's not the latest greatest graphics, right? So it's hard to test. Because I would play Minecraft on Xbox if I could do ray tracing. I think that would be that would pull me in to at least give it a little bit more time and deal with the controller and slower gameplay. If I could play around with that kind of lighting, I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah. Well, maybe in future, whatever future hardware that they release. But either way, the other thing I guess to chat about here is that like I'm personally not expecting anything huge from a .1 release for 1.21. Like having played a little bit, done some trial chamber stuff, messed around with the crafter, tinkered with some of the other features of 1.21 a little, I haven't encountered any weird behavior or bugs. Like I know that's going to be a different experience for different people on different hardware, and I know Bedrock Edition players still have some concerns that are being addressed over the next few Bedrock previews and hotfixes, but like aside from the expected result of trimming chunks that cut into that second trial chamber, I haven't really encountered anything that felt like this isn't a super polished experience. So I'm not keeping a super close eye out for snapshots just for my own purposes. Obviously, we're going to cover them if they pop up on the show, but I don't really see too much that needs to change about 1.21 so far. I can't think of anything that still needs to creep in the way that the changes to decorated pots felt like a really nice, natural way to continue 1.20. Like, I can't think of too much stuff that feels like it's inherently missing from 1.21 now.
I think it's also nice to see an update that doesn't need immediate critical bug fixes, like a 0.1, 0.2 right away to fix like crashes or something like that. So, I mean, tip of the hat to the team at Mojang for having, a really solid release. And obviously, we don't want to get into the speculation as to what's next as soon as an update drops. The only gameplay that I can imagine getting some sort of unforeseen tweak or adjustment would be trial chamber vault loot, maybe, depending on player feedback over time, or something about the crafter's behavior. And I don't have anything specific in mind. I feel like these are things that maybe we don't know about yet, and only time in the world with millions of people playing will reveal, oh, maybe the crafter should be tweaked to do this way or that way, or maybe the trial chamber vault loot should be a little bit less or a little bit more, like who knows. And I think that that's just something that we may or may not see, but I think it'll need time before it surfaces. But those are the only two things that come to mind. And now, granted, I haven't played the new stuff yet, but keeping up to date with everything and watching a lot of people like you and other people on YouTube play with the new game mechanics and new crafter blocks and stuff like that. Like, it seems to be really solid. Like, there doesn't seem to be a lot missing. I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think our listeners are excited to get into it as well. We have a couple of emails this week we'd like to go over, and obviously we want to hear from the community if there's anything you want to share about your experience of 1.21. So email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Keep the emails short and to the point. It helps us include them in the show a bit more easily. And of course, next week's show is going to be a chunk mail dispenser, which is when we like to read a bunch of listener emails and respond to those in lieu of a main discussion. So if you've got some experiences you want to share about 1.21 or thoughts about Minecraft in general, then you can send them to spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Joel, want to share this first email?
First email comes from Macon S260, underutilizing gold armor. Dear Johnny and Joel, I'm a middle schooler new to Minecraft and the podcast and love both. I can only play Minecraft twice a month, so I use the podcast to stay in the loop. I think that golden armor, rarer than iron armor but having less protection, should have another property to encourage new players like me to mine for gold. Since gold is associated with the nether, I think gold armor should give a degree of fire resistance for every piece of armor worn. A full suit would give full fire resistance and so on. Because the nether is a fiery place, it would give new players a built-in comfort because they can't make fire resistance potions or get fire resistance enchantment very easily. I would especially find comfort in knowing that if I fall into a lava pool, I could get all of my stuff back before dying. To balance this, gold armor already has low durability, and I think resisting fire would wear the armor down faster. Excited to hear what you think of this. Macon S260 died while swimming in lava because he forgot his golden armor in the overworld.
Yeah, I like the idea. Obviously, like, it's nice to have more reasons to use the underused features of the game. And we see this when the developers want to develop a new update. A lot of the time they will add new incentives to interact with old features. Thinking of feeding cactus to camels as an example that came up when the developers were talking about honoring older features of the game. I personally would worry that fire resistance wasn't enough incentive for the drop in armor, because even though the nether is a fiery place, the best case scenario is that you don't walk into any of the fire. Like, the best case scenario is you don't end up dunking yourself in lava by mistake, and more often than not, when you're fighting other enemies, it's going to be ghasts shooting at you, admittedly with fireballs, but the explosive damage, I think, usually does more damage than the actual fire. There's piglin encounters, there's zombie piglin encounters if you misclick. There is, wither skeletons and blazes, and I suppose blazes might be the best example of something that having a bit more fire protection with gold would be a benefit, but I'd be worried about running into a nether fortress without at least iron armor in terms of the protective rating, because otherwise you'd end up being overrun by wither skeletons and 2 or 3 shot in terms of how much damage they can do to you. So that'd be my concern, really, is it's a cool idea, especially with its association with the nether, but I worry that players still wouldn't take the bait.
I had the same feeling. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think that it's a substantial amount of effort from Mojang to make that armor more viable from a fire resistance standpoint, only to have the bulk of players go straight for netherite. Like, it's what is the armor that I can get the most out of by not changing it, just getting to there and basically set it and forget it as fast as I can, because there seems to be that mentality of like, get the best and never look back. Yeah, and it's why people don't wear iron or leather armor, even though leather looks cool and you can dye it all kinds of different colors. Most people just go straight to, iron. They don't bother with leather start off the bat unless they find something early. It's usually, straight to the best you can get, and then the next step is diamond and obviously netherite. That said, I wear a mishmash. I have a gold helmet, elytra, iron pants, and netherite boots. The iron pants make the game a little bit harder for me, but not harder for my server mates, so that's why I have iron pants. Netherite boots because I jump off of stuff all of the time, and I need the durability there, so I'm not repairing them constantly. And the gold helmet is so when I go to the nether, I don't have to deal with piglins. And what I thought might be an interesting solution here would be adding fire resistance to the helmet, if that would give you the same level of fire resistance with the new changes that they were talking about, as if you had a full gold tier set or a full set of fire resistance. So because it's gold, a single fire resistance enchantment gives you full fire resistance, meaning that if you just choose a pair of gold boots or helmet or whatever you want to wear, and that could be something that you could use to then have some fire resistance. But you're sacrificing the protection of a helmet and the durability of a different kind of helmet to have that full fire protection. I think that's where the trade-off would be, because I don't want to change my armor every time I go to the Nether. Like, I don't want to have to switch to gold. I know it creates some cool player interactive stuff, like walking up to an armoring set of dispensers where you step on a pressure plate and it just kind of shoots all the armor onto you, and you still have to take the other armor off. But like, there are ways to do it in game that are kind of fun little RP projects. But ultimately, I haven't changed the way that I wear my armor in forever, to the point where like I have to remember, if I'm just casually going through the Nether and I decide to engage a ghast, or if there's a wither skeleton I have to deal with for some reason, I have to remember I am not wearing much. Like unless I'm kicking him, then I'm not really going to have a lot of luck. Yeah, so that's where I would say is that if you're going to tweak gold armor, I think you have to make it special one piece at a time, not try to incentivize players to leave their netherite armor set at home and switch to a gold armor set, because I think that's an argument you're not going to win.
Yeah, you're trying to change habits at this point. Like, at this stage, with the amount of people who play Minecraft, this might be an easier mechanic to teach somebody new, but all of the die-hard players who've been playing since Diamond Armor was a thing are going to go to Diamond Armor and then probably to Netherites. Like, a lot of them are going to hit Diamond before they ever even reach the Nether. So it's, I think, part of the progression of the game, whether Mojang likes it or not at a certain point. And I think the problem, like, I like the idea that you sort of proposed there of having, certain enchantments work better on different types of armor, but that, again, is a bit of a rework of the enchanting system, because the reason there are tiers of enchantment is because if you get protection 5, or, well, it doesn't go to 5, protection 4 on something, then it's applying the same level of protection across the board, regardless of what armor you're wearing. And that's what the tiers of enchantment really mean. Whereas if it was just protection 1 and there was no like other tiers of it, then you might then consider, well, maybe this protection enchantment works better on a harder set of armor than it does on a softer set like leather or gold. And that fundamentally changes the way enchantment works, and I think makes it a harder to understand system as a result. Whereas, like, if you upgrade the armor, yes, gold armor actually is more enchantable than anything else. Like, gold as a material, you can get efficiency 5 on a gold pickaxe out of the enchanting table, which is something it's basically impossible to do if you're enchanting something made of diamond. But, the fact that nobody uses gold pickaxes means that people don't typically find that out. And you can still get efficiency 5 on another tool, you just have to combine books to do it and put a little bit more work in, or combine tools to do it. And you're still getting a better tool out of that, because the efficiency rating goes all the way up to 5, and that's the same for every type of tools. You can have an efficiency 5 wood pickaxe if you want to. And yes, the mining speed of those is a little different, and that's kind of what gives diamond and netherite pickaxes the edge over other stuff, but gold mines stuff really fast as well. There are little nuances that people don't typically discover except through reading about it on the wiki, because they're not going to bother with gold tools and armor. So if gold gave you slightly more fire protection, I don't think most players would even think to find that out, because they'd be too busy going through the intended progression of the game and look at, okay, what gives me the most bars of armor on the little HUD display of how armored up I am, and they'd go after that rather than go after something that had a bit more nuance to it. Outside of that, I did a bit of Googling based on this one, because I thought it was kind of curious to see this. Gold obviously has this reputation of being a softer metal, which is why people argue for it being a worse pickaxe than an iron pickaxe, even though the progression of a lot of video games tends towards, like, well, gold is a rarer material, it's more valuable, therefore it's better when you're using it in tools. But then Minecraft says, no, actually gold would make a really poor pickaxe material because it's softer. And so I looked it up, and the melting point of gold is 1064 degrees Celsius, which is a very Minecrafty feeling number with the 64 on the end. And the melting point of iron is closer to about 1500 Celsius. So it's about 500 degrees more, give or take. While lava temperatures range from about 700 degrees Celsius to 1200 degrees Celsius. That's what you get from, like, molten rock. And so you'd expect that the gold would actually be quicker to melt in lava and have less fire resistance than iron, which takes a much higher temperature in order to melt. So,
Right.
again, if we're going by real-world logic, which obviously Minecraft doesn't, but they like to tip a hat to real-world physics every so often, I think gold is less likely to give you fire resistance natively than it is more likely, you know? And maybe the reason it exists in the Nether in the first place is because it's a softer material and has, I don't know, melted into some of the blocks that then become nether gold ore or something like that. It's interesting to speculate about that stuff, but I get the sense that players are going to have a harder time adapting to that. My takeaway from this for our question asker is now do chain armor, because I've always found it kind of strange that chain armor exists. It can only be acquired through killing mobs or trading. It's not craftable, and its only real benefit is being able to see your Minecraft skin through every other pixel of the texture. And sometimes people go for that, but it doesn't have anything else unique about it other than just being bad armor compared to iron armor. And I kind of want to know if there's something people have as an idea that would incentivize players wearing chain in the same way that the association with piglins and piglins not bothering you when you go to the nether incentivizes people to wear gold. So if you've got any ideas, once again, the email address is open to you. Let us know if there's anything you would suggest there. Our second email comes in from SW Escobedo with the subject of an enchantment inventory crossover. Hey Pix and Joel, I was listening to episode 301 where you talked about the undesirability of fire and blast protection compared to general protection, as well as how the highest enchantment level isn't necessarily best for the wind burst enchantment. It got me thinking about the staleness of the enchantment meta and how it could be partially solved by something you discuss on the show often, an inventory update. What if, as part of an inventory overhaul, Mojang gave the player several slots for each type of armor, as well as a dedicated weapon and tool hotbar? I think the player base would be more interested in creating armor and tools for specific uses if they could carry multiple sets without sacrificing inventory spaces for blocks and other items. What do you think? SW Escobedo died to cave spiders because who on earth uses Bane of Arthropods? People who don't die to cave spiders is the answer to that question, I think.
Pretty much. We had them on the swords and stuff when I was building our cave spider spawner very early on in the Citadel. It was an essential enchantment to have, for sure. When you've got 3 cave spawners all within spawning distance of you, like it's a bad time. I get that we're already stretching the reality of how much a player can carry in Minecraft, for like the sheer volume of stuff that you can carry.
Yeah.
However, I don't see Mojang adding additional multiple armor slots for different kinds of armor to be carried on the player. I know I just said that I don't want to have to go somewhere and change my armor. I think that having a loadout like that would be a little bit overpowered, and especially because in other video games that do this, like that loadout is kind of your mini game, like choosing the armor that you have, how it affects that gameplay, what are attributes it has. That's part of your strategy, whether it's raiding an ocean monument, whether you're going into the nether, maybe you're going to fight the dragon at the end. Like those armor choices matter. And if you had one of everything on you, then it really wouldn't matter about the strategy. You would just kind of go in, and if you started losing, you'd switch your armor out while you're there. And so there's a lot less risk. And so the reward feels less, I guess, climactic when you defeat the dragon than if you had gone in with, I hope the strategy works, and you win. Then you're like, all right, well, that felt pretty good. Versus if you just go in and just like, oh, I'm taking a lot less damage. So let me just quickly switch out to my super, better armor, and we'll go from there. I feel like the difference that other games have in this light to Minecraft is that very often other games will have a skill tree. And that is something that can often be retuned because you're getting experience points or level points as you go up, and you take these skills and you augment these skills, and you get, maybe you're better at archery or you're better at sword play or whatever it is in these RPG games. But if you decide, I'm not having as much fun, I want to try pole arms, or I want to try, you had like a monk class, I think, in Minecraft Dungeons that you really, really liked.
Yeah.
Or a monk style of playing, I guess, fisticuffs. And so, but you could respect that. And in terms of like changing the way that your gameplay was played. So I wonder if enchanting could be retuned in Minecraft to be more like a skill tree applied to the player instead of being applied to specific armor. Like if that's the kind of overhaul that we're talking about, then that might be something that could be interesting. I mean, it would be completely different to what we have now. It would not be a tweak to what we have. It would be a complete change. But if it costs levels, or if it costs something to do that, maybe you have to visit something like a beacon to retune your skill tree or whatever that happens to be. And then you have to have farms or have experience or have done something in the past before you go get ready for that dragon fight. You say, all right, well, now I have to go visit my power up beacon and retune my specs, because I want to have different skills to fight the Ender Dragon than I do to fight the Wither, or than I do to fight, Guardians in an Ocean Monument, that kind of thing. I do still think a tool belt is a really good idea, though. I think that that's one of the more interesting and potentially successful ways to free up player inventory. So tools, I think, are different than armor. Having the ability to have tools outside of your existing inventory, I think, would free up player creativity. Whereas right now it does feel like it kind of hampers it a bit. Whereas the armor extra slots just feel like a make easy button for part of the game to me.
Yeah. Much as I like the idea of Minecraft Steve ripping off one suit of armor Superman style and revealing another set of armor underneath, almost like one of those kind of tearaway costumes or something. Yeah, I do think having multiple slots for sets of armor, it would have to be done in a really specific way. And Terraria does this. There are vanity slots for armor that allow you to quickly swap between armor pieces on the fly. That's what some players use it for. Other players just use it to like pick items that suit your character's aesthetic better. So you can have like end game armor and have the kind of full, ridiculous space suit of armor, but then over the top, it can look like a normal character. They can look like your normal outfit, or it can look like, a princess dress or whatever kind of stuff you pick up along the way. And I think that suits that game a little better. With Minecraft, you'd have more of a PvP scene, so having like aesthetic armor versus real armor would be confusing to other players, and would like people would probably use that tactically to lie about what kind of armor they had, and it would create like a psychological angle that might work in some situations, but I don't know if it's like the best thing for Minecraft's PvP scene. I think, at least it's possible to hot swap armor from the hotbar now on both versions of the game. It was previously only possible on Bedrock, so I think it's good that we have options like that, but expanding the player inventory for that kind of switching around, it feels like a concession to gameplay that has very niche uses, Like, there are actually fairly few circumstances in which you feel like you need to switch to one. Like, more often than not, it's retroactive. It's like the benefit of hindsight. I wish I'd had my fire protection armor on me when the lava poured on me at that given moment. But I think so rarely there'll be situations in which you're like, oh, I need to swap to my projectile protection armor, and you don't have time to put down a shulker box and get out another suit of armor. I mean, if you don't have time to do that, then you probably don't have time to open your inventory and click on a few things to swap your armor over, which means it's a hotkey, which means it has to have a control scheme that works on Bedrock Edition for people playing on a controller or a touchscreen, and then, the issues with it sort of spiral from there. I think, again, the idea of having slots for dedicated weapons, or like a toolbar that you could swap out for the hotbar, stuff like that sounds great in principle, and I think there are great ways of implementing it in the base game, but I don't know if circumstantially this stuff is going to come up super often. It's sort of the same argument people are having about the mace now, is that I'm probably leaving the mace at home because I don't want to smash attack absolutely everything, but I want it on speed dial if the occasion arises that I can leap off a cliff and hit a creeper to get a little bit of, save the full damage and also get some revenge on the way down.
Yeah, I think that the toolbar thing for me, I think just comes from other games, other building games that have it. I think I've mentioned Satisfactory before, and how nice it is to have, like your mouse wheel control your tools, and then have your hotkey buttons control your building choices and stuff like that. It felt like it freed up a little bit more creativity. I think with the choices, I keep on coming back to having to use a gold helmet to keep piglins at bay when you go to the Nether. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's like, I don't think it would be a big deal to have to change my hat. Like, I change my hat all the time. Ball cap for the gym, cap, like gray cap that I'm wearing now for when I go out places. I feel like in those cases, I almost get a little annoyed that it's tied to the helmet as opposed to tied to something else like a trinket that you could carry that you'd have to swap out that doesn't affect anything else. Like doesn't offer you protection. Like the only thing the trinket does is keep piglins away from you. You know, as if like a totem of undying because they're kind of gold looking. If that's what you had to carry around in the nether to keep piglins away, then that would be to me more interesting than having to have it on your helmet. But then again, you're also sacrificing an inventory slot for that, as opposed to you already have an inventory slot on your body for the helmet. It doesn't take anything extra in your inventory, but then you're sacrificing, you know, the protection of a better helmet. So it's all about those yin yang choices in the game of like sacrificing something to then gain either movement or safety or advantage, you know, in another situation. So it's a tight balance. Like for anybody at Mojang that is looking at either the enchantment system or the inventory system as like how can we better balance this, or what changes could we make, that has to be a really tough balancing conversation. Like that has to be something where it's just like, man, this, as soon as you get into the weeds, I imagine it's just like a domino effect of like how that could affect all kinds of things in the game.
Yeah, and a little bit of food for thought, actually, going back to what you were saying about XP earlier and the enchanting system. I think it's actually really interesting that we think of the green orbs that you acquire in Minecraft as experience, and that's what they're termed in the sort of back end of the game, but it's never really sort of stated out loud. Like even the bottles of experience you get, I think, are still called bottles of enchanting. I think it's really interesting that we think of it as experience, and yet it's always applied to external things to the player, right? It's the experience levels you use are for enchanting or repairing tools, but they're not for improving the player's stats or abilities in any way. Right. And that makes it so different to what we think of as experience systems from other games, from RPGs, let's say, or for anything that has that skill tree progression. You're using the experience points to fundamentally improve yourself rather than your equipment. And I wonder if there's a way in future that Minecraft can extract those concepts from each other, so that if we have a system that is experience, it is about player improvement and player skill, and about helping the player achieve certain levels of that, versus enchanting points, or whatever you want to call them, which are there for modifying, repairing, and augmenting your equipment. Because, you know, we are not always our tools, I think is the philosophical concept we want to take out of that. And I sort of wonder if there's a way of retooling experience as a system that allows it to feel like experience in other games, or just rebrands what we think of as experience now as something that's a bit more relevant to its use in the meta.
I like the idea that instead of changing the enchantment system, you add a new system, like add an experience system separately.
Yeah. Again, like it's teaching people new habits when they've been playing this game for 15 years. But also, the enchanting system has changed over the years, so I wouldn't put it past them to. That's true too. Shake things up a little bit, especially with the discourse around that after the villager trading changes. Moving on, though, we want to talk about 1.21 a little bit more, since it is the hot button topic these days. People have been in the update for over a week now, and on the surface, 1.21 is a pretty combat-focused update. By the devs' own admission, the trial chambers are meant to be combat, the mace is there as a new weapon for the game, and the tinkering stuff that they talked about, which is, you know, the crafter and a few other blocks and so forth, feel like a secondary thing where the main feature of the update is combat focused. So we wanted to discuss what's in it for folks like us who enjoy other playstyles. Joel and I are both self-confessed builders, and I've obviously spent a bunch of this week mining out a trial chamber. And I really wanted to do that because I read an undercurrent in my YouTube comments and a bit of the discourse online, like most people praising trial chambers as an experience, but there were people who weren't interested in a combat challenge, saying, well, what am I here for? What's for me in this update? And while I think it is too easy to just say, well, there are new blocks in this update, the builders get the new blocks, and that's the stuff that you guys like, right? It's a critical part of what appeals to builders in any update, but I thought, what is the incentive to still go to a trial chamber to acquire those blocks? So I took down most of a half-generated trial chamber this week. Like I said, it was bordering on chunks that I'd already explored, so there were some sections that were cut off with previously generated natural terrain. but I still came away from taking down probably 3/4 of it with 7 double chests of tough bricks, and there were plenty more still available in the rest of the structure that I could have taken away. I got more or less a single chest of chiseled tough bricks and a couple of stacks of chiseled tough, which I now have to remember in my head are 2 different blocks. And I got a shulker box each of waxed copper and waxed oxidized copper blocks, another shulker full of miscellaneous copper grates, chiseled copper, cut copper, doors, trapdoors, and about 2 stacks of copper bulbs, most of which were fresh, but some were aged. I think 2 stacks is lowballing it as well. I think I might have had a few more. I think what I also got out of that was a large spawn-proof underground area and several trial spawners that I can now farm for resources. In the first one, it was mostly bones, string, and slime, but in this one, poison arrows from the bogged, string from the spiders, obviously breeze rods and wind charges and the stuff you get from that. And what I found along the way was that there was also a lot of value in having blocks pre-crafted. And you don't see that many people going and taking down strongholds just to get stone bricks, because more often than not, there's plenty of stone, it's abundant around you. But having done projects in the past where I've wanted to get large quantities of tuff, it's a very deliberate task. It's not the kind of thing that you acquire passively because you're digging around for resources in the same way that you acquire like cobbled deep slate when you're searching for diamonds and that kind of thing. You also can't trade tuff from stonemasons, so you can't buy it in the same way that you can buy dripstone or quartz or blocks like that. And so I'm actually quite wary of using a ton of the tuff blocks that I've gathered to craft tough bricks and chiseled tuff and everything when it's acquirable in such large quantities from these structures. And so I'm actually preserving all of the natural tuff that I've already got, especially now it has slabs and stairs and walls and that kind of thing. And taking down this trial chamber meant that I still had all of the other blocks to play around with without having to eat into my natural tough supply. So I was wondering if that was something that kind of appealed to you, Joel, about the experience. Like, would you go and take down a trial chamber in order to get hold of these blocks instead of using up the natural tuff that you're already using in like the walls and decorative stuff around West Hill?
Oh, 100%. I was just thinking, I have a shulker box full of tuff that I didn't mine. The only reason I have it is because Cosmic dropped it off. They mined out a massive project underneath Somerville and ended up with, because of this kind of mine all the things hole that they dug, they ended up with a lot of everything. Deep slate, tuff. Because previously what was happening, I had to go to deep slate level, look for a patch of tuff, mine it out, and see if it was enough for my project that day. And then get another one, and it took a long time. You know, if you're looking, it's one of those things where like when you're looking for it, you can never freaking find it. And I remember that, and then now that I've had this shulker box for a while, and it is starting to get a little bit lower, I have the same mentality. I don't want to use it for anything other than slabs and stairs, which I'm very excited about because that's going to be great for landscaping, especially near water. A lot of the river stuff that I've been doing around West Hill will be heavily adorned with tough blocks because they look really they look like wet rocks if you in the right context, which is very useful. But the tough bricks, the chiseled tough, all the variants therein, I'm very much interested, especially having watched your video about mining out the trial chamber with like 7 double chests. Like that is, not only is that not nothing, that's almost more than you need for, I mean, unless you're like your viewers were joking, unless you're reconstructing this trial chamber somewhere else block for block, like the chances of you needing that much tough, bricks specifically is pretty low.
Yeah.
So you can mine out one of these things and get a really sizable amount of material. And I'm at a stage on the Citadel, it's nearly 7 years old. We have very easy access to shulker boxes. So taking a bunch of shulker boxes to a trial chamber and mining it out will be of great interest for me. Not just for the tough, but for the copper blocks as well, because I like the copper blocks, but I don't like waiting for them to age. And I don't have a lot of copper. I've got a kind of a mishmash in my shulker box system of just like enough to try different palettes and see what's up. But a lot of times I've got to wait for them to oxidize if they're the wrong thing, and then build the roof out of like regular copper and wait for it to age, and then go back with an axe and some waxing and like get it to look exactly how I want, rather than just having reams of pre-crafted copper at different stages ready to go, which with a little elbow grease after you mine out a trial chamber, you could absolutely do. Like you could take half of your copper and turn it into oxidized, or use the axe to strip it down, like this kind of stuff. And I think that that's a real advantage for builders. I think that something that builders are not used to is breaking down existing structures. Like a lot of times when you're a builder, you think, what can I mine? Where can I mine it from in the world? Not thinking about breaking down a structure, but like digging it out of the ground. And then what can I turn it into? Whereas like for me, a good example would be there was a village, a Minecraft village where West Hill is now, where the East Market was a village. And I tore the whole thing down. For the longest time, I didn't need planks, stairs, slabs, like I still have 3 stacks of oak stairs in a shulker box because I can't go through them. One village is all I mined out, right? Mm-hmm. But when you have that kind of stuff, like you don't realize how long it will last by just ripping down one existing Minecraft structure. Like think about all the dark oak that you'd get if you decided to not preserve but completely dismantle a woodland mansion.
Yeah.
Like it would just be crazy amounts of wood, right? It's a lot.
Honestly, I've never thought, I don't think I've destroyed a woodland mansion. I think I've tried to rebuild sections of one for the museum in Survival Guide Season 1. And yeah, like a lot of material goes into those, like more than you would expect, just based on the sheer size of them. The coolest thing about taking down a trial chamber, though, is that the tough bricks are insta-mineable with haste and efficiency. So efficiency 5, haste 2 will insta-mine tough bricks and chiseled tough and those variants in the same way that you can insta-mine stone. And the radius of a single beacon covered basically the entire area. And again, this was a half-generated trial chamber, so it might have extended further in some of the axes, but I put it more or less in the middle of this structure, which is more or less where I mined into it. And from there, I was able to reach every corner that I needed to with the haste effect from a beacon. So you could very easily mine the entire thing out without too much setup, which I think is the problem with some structures. You could like use a beacon and take stuff down, but they sprawl. Think of a stronghold and the fact that the corridors go off in all sorts of different directions and it can extend quite far down. You sometimes leave the beacon radius if you were, say, going through there for cracked stone bricks or mossy stone bricks. And you'd also have to deal with silverfish along the way. But I think the cool thing about trial chambers is they feel relatively uncomplicated to take down. Especially once you've got the spawners blocked off, nothing's going to spawn in there to interrupt the process either. So for builders who don't want the combat thing going on, you can stealthily sneak in and block all of the spawners, and then the place is yours to do whatever you want with. I agree that the copper blocks are another huge incentive, and one thing I discovered is that you can still turn waxed copper blocks into copper ingots, but then that removes the wax.
Right.
So if you want those copper blocks to be able to age, here's a fun tip for you that uses 1.21 features. Feed them into a crafter that's just crafting those, spitting them out into another crafter that recrafts them back into normal copper blocks. And from there, you end up with an unwaxing machine that doesn't have to involve player input, so you're not like running a piston feed tape and scraping everything manually with an axe to get the wax off. You obviously can't do that with the oxidized copper, but more often than not, you want that fully oxidized, or you're using it individually as a block that you can then de-age with an axe. But if you want stuff to be able to age naturally, or you're just looking for later stages of copper that you can then turn into cut copper or copper grates or whatever, then it's going to make it a little bit easier for people to gather copper and then do whatever they want with it from there. So so some little not like life hacks. It feels a little bit too niche to be a life hack, but there are certain people I think are going to find that tremendously useful. I think the other major thing that builders get out of structures like this, which goes sort of overlooked, is they are meaningfully different project areas. So, like, if you think about redoing the interior of a Guardian temple, like an ocean monument, once you've dried all of that out, you can turn that into a project that feels very different to just building something on the surface, like you're repurposing the structure. And I think one of the things that people overlook when it comes to a new structure like this, and they think, what's in it for me? What's in it for you is the ability to turn all of this into a completely dark labyrinth and guarantee that no mob spawns would happen inside of it, right?
Yeah.
Like you could make a really cool maze minigame in there. You could, if you're as ambitious as somebody like Tango Tech on Hermitcraft, build a custom dungeon around the trial spawners, and even have the option for a harder challenge if somebody drinks an ominous bottle before they go into that dungeon, right? Like there are lots of little different ways that you can utilize those, and maybe because it's underground, people don't think of these as project spaces. They think of them as, oh, well, Minecraft put this here, I'm not going to touch it. But the fact is, people can tear that whole thing down and do whatever they want with the space, and it can become a reason to play. It can be incentive to tackle something new, in the same way that you think, well, there's a new biome on the surface, what am I going to build in that biome? What am I going to build in the space a trial chamber has left behind? And I think that's an interesting question that you don't see builders asking themselves too much in comments, but I expect it's because if they ask themselves that, they think, well, I probably better get to work on that now, and they don't have time to leave a comment expressing that as their opinion. But either way, if you haven't thought of that already, builders out there, I think it's really food for thought.
I feel like it's a weird flip on the mentality coming from the last update with archaeology, right? Because archaeology, you come across a trail ruin, and the idea there is like uncover it, but preserve it. Like, don't tear it down. It's a lot of terracotta and other cool things that you might not want to have to go as far to get as you normally would in the game. But for the trial chamber, like here we are talking about, like, no, dismantle it. Like, take all the things and leave yourself a fancy looking hole that nothing will spawn in. As you were talking about that, it got me thinking about, I can't remember whether it was a data pack or a mod that showed like the bounding boxes of a wither fortress, of a nether fortress, and showed like the different boxes around the crossroads and things like that. It would be cool if you can get the same thing with the bounding boxes of a trial chamber, so that you could be absolutely sure where things are spawning, things are not going to spawn. You could give yourself some indicator bricks as you're building your dungeon project or whatever your dark room thing is, to know like, okay, there's my limit. Like, I understand that if I hit the bright red concrete, then I'm going to start having stuff spawn outside of that. And then you just have to make sure that stuff outside of that is, maybe that's your lobby. You know, like maybe the stuff where it doesn't matter is where you could put other rooms that you can light up and make them spawn proof on your own. And then just utilize all of the space within the bounding box of the trial chamber. I don't know whether it's one big box or whether it's like incremental boxes, sort of like how another fortress has like different boxes around different areas. I don't know how that works yet in the trial chambers, but I love the idea of a project space. I think that the only downside is that it's underground. In that, like, depending on what your idea would be, you don't have access. Well, I mean, you could have access to the sky if you want to have a lot of work on your hands. Get a lot of natural tuff that way, anyway. But yeah, it'd be a really interesting way to have a home base, because I would love to be able to walk around a base that's just lit the way that I want. I don't have to worry about creeper surprises. I'm not forced into changing the way that it looks because of game mechanics. I can really just kind of do whatever my imagination comes up with and go from there. And I don't know what that would do for the effects of if you found a skeleton spawner nearby, or if you had a dark room spawner for, let's say, a creeper farm, but you built it right next to the empty space from a trial chamber. If that's where you're spending most of your time, then most of the area that you'd be loading mobs wouldn't be loading mobs, because it's already a pre-mob proof area. So it could be a great place for redstone aficionados to build their farms, because it could mean that less lighting up of caves and less clearing of the area if you've got this initial like spawn-free zone, right?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that I built my slime farm offshore of a mushroom island, because all of that space is not natively spawnable, and it would only become spawnable if there was some other type of biome underneath it, like a dripstone cave or something, which fortunately there wasn't. And I think the trial chambers might be a little bit too small to make it super easy, but it would at least mean minimal lighting up of surrounding caves if some of that area was already naturally spawn-proof. You can see people doing the same thing with the Deep Dark, except the Deep Dark is already scary enough that I think it doesn't occur to a lot of people to mess around with that stuff and find the precise location that a mob farm would be super effective. I think having project areas like that is really important from a building perspective, and is definitely something people overlook. Outside of that, there's still some things that I think bleed over from other gameplay styles that are really useful for builders. Think about stuff like the Crafter, right? Like, I have seen a little bit of pushback now against the Crafter's usefulness because we have players considering its place in long-term permanent worlds and not seeing the need for automatic crafting of everything when we usually have time to craft stuff manually. Like, it's cool to come up with ways it can work, but it's like, it's the same as the argument of, you know, why would I have all of this automated storage when I'm just going to go and walk up to the chests and use them anyway? And I think the crafter's main use case, broadly speaking, is still in farms where the output can be easily condensed. But I think a secondary use case, aside from like finding ways that it can be used to like attach onto farms and craft like fireworks for you from a mob farm and a sugarcane farm together, I think the secondary use case I see talked about much less is in helping craft recipes where the inventory management is annoying. And I think dispensers come up a lot for this, and that's one of the examples we've talked about in the past, just because bows aren't stackable. And I think that is maybe the only recipe in the game that requires an unstackable item. I could be wrong about that, but I was doing a little bit of looking on the Minecraft wiki before this, just through lists and lists of crafting recipes, and I thought, I don't really think there are any others that use like a sword or something as an ingredient in a redstone component or anything like that. So maybe our live chat can think of some while I'm pondering this, but the other stuff I might use it for is like concrete powder. Having recently crafted a ton of concrete powder for my project on Minecraft SOS, I've always got the wrong ratio of sand and gravel in my inventory. I'm always like reaching for a shulker box, filling up my inventory with one, and then realizing I barely have any of the other, and then I'm opening containers so often, whereas the crafter needs them to be fed in from all sides constantly, but a pretty simple redstone clock can get the crafter crafting stuff on a cycle that it's not going to run out of ingredients as it goes, and all of the dyes and the gravel and sand all get fed in from the sides, and what gets output is some concrete powder that you have not had to worry about crafting. I think the same thing goes for stuff like dark prismarine and sea lanterns, where the proportions are going to be balanced a certain way, and some of those things are just kind of awkward to get. And snow blocks, when snowballs can only stack to 16, and you can fill your inventory with snowballs, and you get maybe like a stack and a half of snow blocks back, and you go, something about the maths here is not adding up, and it's that snowballs don't stack to 64. But I think having a crafter to do that, if you're working on a big snowy area, I think back to my ski resort project in Survival Guide Season 1, would have absolutely killed for something to automatically craft snow blocks for me, so I didn't have to do it when I was farming snow from the snow golems. So I think there's lots of little ways in which builders' quality of life can be made better by these secondary uses for the crafter that people haven't considered yet.
I definitely agree on the recipes that are a pain in the butt. Concrete comes to my mind forefront because we have Southport, the modern city area on the Citadel. And to combine your idea of having a crafter make the color of concrete that you want, we also have a bunch of concrete makers near the city because we use so much concrete in the building. But that is for, you already have the concrete powder, you're placing it near a water source, and then it like places auto breaks, and then it gets picked up and put into a shulker box for you. But if you had, instead of a dispenser shooting these pre-made concrete blocks at you, if you had a crafter shooting those blocks at you, or a crafter shooting those blocks into the dispenser, then you'd eliminate the process of, you know, doing it all by hand behind the scenes. You still have to do the hard concrete manually with the water, but honestly, those little concrete makers, they don't take that long, because you can put your, for at least on PC, you can put your left and right mouse button down at the same time and just wait, talk to the chat room, whatever you're going to do, and it doesn't take that long. Then there's also the idea of the ones that use TNT, like if you're using a TNT concrete farm, which we have one of those as well. But again, like, you could have it set up where you can just walk up to it, dial the crafter the way that you want, have several crafters, maybe all 16 colors, and then just by turning on a T flip-flop with the new copper bulb, just, you know, line it up and decide which color you're going to craft that day. Or if you need 2 or 3 colors. Like you could turn on the funnels for all the different ones that you need to craft for that project. And it doesn't matter what order they come in if you're going to just blow them up in order to then collect them and then put them in your inventory anyway. So I think that to me is one of the more interesting uses of the crafter. And the crafter to me reminds me of all the factory games that I've played and liked. It's not necessarily the fastest, easiest thing to do. It's more fun though. It's cooler because robots. Like that's why I like about it. I like flipping a switch and having a thing do the thing, as opposed to having to do it myself. Like I can craft moss and cobble into mossy cobble. I can use moss to make mossy anything very quickly. Or I could have it set up in the background and just not have to do it. I just walk up to the chest that I want it from and get it. And I'd much rather do that. Like I think about the storage system that Etho has been using lately on his single player world and in Hermitcraft, where he has a shulker box full of designated spaces, and he just puts the shulker box in the ceiling and it gets filled up because of all the different components he has in the ceiling, and it just gets auto replenished by just the fact that there's no other space in that shulker for things to go other than what's left. And I love that idea. And there's a certain level of that in the crafter. Like you can sort of use the crafter in that way, but it's on a very specific use case. I mean, I know that you've brought up using the crafter to have near a creeper farm and a sugarcane farm. And so not only can you use it to condense certain things like an iron farm or different, like a melon farm, to condense the output and have it take less storage, but you can also combine those items and make it into the one thing you're going to use that for anyway. I mean, sure, you might use gunpowder for TNT, but most of the time you're going to be using rockets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sugar from a sugar cane every once in a while, paper from a sugar cane all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then by doing that, you're also reducing the stress on the storage for each of the creeper farm and the sugarcane farm, because you're taking a good chunk of those resources and turning them into rockets anyway. So it's a really interesting way of making some of these long-term farms that I often on my world have overflowing with stuff and don't want to build another 6 double chests of sorting system for, to be just like, oh, I can put the crafter in here and sometimes like X the storage by 9, depending on what kind of farm it is, to store everything. So I don't know if I buy the pushback. I mean, I'm sure it's happening. I just think that it's a little short-sighted. I mean, I'm also a crafter fanboy, so I'm really looking forward to getting into it. But there's a lot of stuff that I do late game where the only time I don't mind crafting something by hand is when I need like 6. Like I just need a small amount, half a stack or less. But if I need a shulker box full of something, I want a way to do it automatically in the background, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I wanted to bring up, aside from new paintings, which don't really need like to be anything more to be said about them, like I think the fact that we have new paintings in this game is so good for builders.
Yeah.
But like wind charges, I've started playing around with them now, and I think they have the potential to replace something like ender pearls at short range. And they have the same kind of like skill level as ender pearls in terms of learning how to use them is the trickiest part. Like learning, especially when you're throwing an ender pearl, you're looking at angles, you're looking at like what happens if I overshoot this? Do I land in a lava lake or the ocean on the other side? And you're trying to use them in a couple of different ways. I think if you're getting into tight spaces, ender pearls are usually really useful for stuff like that. If there's like a section of redstone that you need to go in and do maintenance in, but it's wrapped in like the shell of a larger machine around it, then that's still useful. But then if you're getting onto like rooftops, for example, I find it often really difficult to gauge what angle is going to throw the ender pearl up and arc it and have it come down directly on the roof, as opposed to going over the other side and then landing behind the house that I'm trying to build and going, well, actually, no, I want it to be up there. And the alternative is, trying to find a way to like jump shot so that it lands like it arcs away and forwards from you instead of upwards from you. And instead of all of that, now we have the wind charge, which learning the timing is really the tricky part, because to get the most out of the jump, you basically have to jump and use the wind charge at the same time. Or like you have to use the wind charge the split second after you jump. And that's when the knockback momentum gets applied to the upward momentum of your jump. You don't get the same kind of momentum from it if you're already coming down from a jump. It feels instead like the wind charge is cushioning your landing. And learning that timing is going to be the key to using them, but I think they're going to be way better at getting you up onto rooftops. Like jumps of maybe like 7 or 8 blocks, I think is how much you get the advancement for using a wind charge. That's like ideal situation. Like that's probably where like most of the eaves of the houses that I built around my project area on the survival guide are anyway. So I'm just leaping up onto rooftops using that. And so I think builders are going to find that there are tools like ender pearls and wind charges that make it easier for them to get to certain spots in a build. And if you've got them on you, that's the main thing, is can I sacrifice the inventory space for a utility thing that's really going to help me get around this build I'm working on? And I think that's what remains to be seen about wind charges. I'm curious to see whether they really get adopted by builders as a useful utility, or if players just can't find the right groove to get into that they find them useful.
Do wind charges stack to 16 or 64?
64, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
So advantage wind charge over ender pearl then.
Yeah. And having fought a few breezes now with looting, you get something like between 4 and 8 breeze rods, and each of those breaks down into 4 wind charges. So with killing a couple of breezes, you can potentially have a stack of wind charges.
Okay. Yeah.
Plus you're also getting them from vaults and like loot and stuff occasionally as well, but like within like 2 or 3 breezes, you will have enough for most of a stack of wind charges, as long as you got looting 3. So I think they're pretty accessible in a way that they didn't feel like they were when they were originally introduced. It felt like the ratio was off in terms of what the player received from Trial Chambers and the Breeze, that now it feels a lot more attainable to get a bunch of them really easily. Like I have 3 or 4 stacks of Breeze rods now that could turn into like, half a chest of wind charges at this point.
I know that you can combine the momentum of an ender pearl and, is it Riptide on the Trident?
Yes.
Because that's how they did Hermitcraft Golf a couple of seasons ago.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Trident Golf, yeah.
Can you combine the momentum from a wind charge and an ender pearl or a Trident? Have you tried that?
I think in terms of, you'd use the wind charge first because you need to repel yourself off a surface.
Right.
And then you'd have to be really quick getting the angle once you hit the height of your jump to be able to like correct and throw the ender pearl. You could definitely use Riptide as long as it was raining.
Right.
Because that's the only situation in which you can use it not standing in water. But yeah, there are a few like I said, the wind charge and the mace are all going to be about like trick shots and like what combination of momentum tricks you can use to get around an environment. And I think that's going to be something that will play itself out more in minigame contexts than it will in like a PvE, just kind of general survival context. But I do think there can be some fun tricks that if you want to get around your world quickly and just kind of hop and skip and jump between like, tiptoeing across mountaintops and then launching yourself into the next area, I think some combination of, tridents, ender pearls, wind charges, maybe a smash attack or 2 with the wind burst mace, you could have a lot of fun getting around that way. And once players have a rhythm for that kind of traversal, then it's going to feel like an incredibly skillful way of getting around, which I think is a fun thing for players to have.
Would you compare it to like double tapping that spacebar to take off with Elytra? Like that learned timing that you have to take, like from standing dead still to getting airborne? Is it a similar kind of like learned timing for the wind charge?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And the double tap spacebar has been made a little easier recently, but for a while it used to be you had to open your wings as you were falling, so people learned the timing of that. And I think with a bit more experience, and as long as I'm not feeling too precious about the wind charges that I already have, like as long as I know I can very easily go and get more, I can see myself experimenting with them until I get the timing right, and then I'll be absolutely dynamite with them, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Nice.
if my old man timing can allow me to kind of have the reflexes for it, then we'll see what we can do. But yeah, I will have to report back on that in future to see if the wind charge and using it for that has really helped with building projects. But once I've got something else like that going on, I'll definitely check back in. For now, though, I think that's probably where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, where pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every week, and we also have monthly hangouts and quarterly hangouts coming up in the calendar, and that's where you can share what you've been up to in Minecraft and also get the behind-the-scenes facts and figures of the podcast. We currently have 325 patrons, which is down one from last week, but we're welcoming a new content engineer to their hallowed ranks this time around. So special thanks to Gundar H. Striker for joining, as well as the usual crowd of Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mind Trip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available every Monday on all of the major podcasting platforms, and of course the video content here on YouTube. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked at thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its third season. Expect things to be a little disrupted while I'm away, but should hopefully get back into the swing of things before long. I'm also streaming 3 days a week on Twitch up until we go away, and then a couple of weeks hiatus, and I'll be back after that. But most of that is behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Links to everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com. That includes a link to the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I'm Joel Duggan on social media, Joel Duggan on Twitch, very easy to find. I stream Thursday through Sunday, where I play Minecraft and build in West Hill on the Citadel server. And on Fridays, I build Lego, and I have a custom Minecraft-related build coming up. So check that out. That's all over at twitch.tv/JoelDuggan.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but what's in it for me?